Well, good afternoon, everybody. 2 o'clock on day 3 of the Streetworks conference. After some interesting sessions from Baroness Veer this morning, I'm sure it asked a few questions of us, which we'll address, and I'll write back to her as I discussed. And also good session just now on skills and training, with some very thoughtful pieces by our own team and some invited guests. But this afternoon, now, it's a return to the policy issues that we are dealing with as an organization. And who better to tell us about the policy landscape than Alison Williams and Janet Chapman, and guesting from DFT on the phone, but not in person, as it were, Myles Smith. So all three of you, an extremely warm welcome again this afternoon. Okay, just a few domestics then to get us going. I just want you all to know, top left-hand side, it's being recorded. So if you object to being recorded, your comments recorded, you may leave the event now if you so wish. Please, for those of you who haven't been on this session before, do use the chat tote. Do not use the Q&A tote. Use the chat tote to ask any questions that you wish to as we go along, or any points to make. But this one is slightly different, okay? So once the speakers are finished speaking, we're going to make you all panelists so you can come on and talk verbally, as it were, as we go. Give you a chance to have that good verbal interaction and do it that way around. Can I just say in the meantime, as we go, if you do have the answers to any questions anybody else is asking, don't answer them in the chat. So it just makes it harder to pick up any questions or points for those of us who are dealing with that stuff. So save any commentary you wish to verbally make commentary later on in the session, for which there will be plenty of time. We'll probably go on till about 10 to 5 to 3, because right after this we've got the EA session, the excavated waste session. And yesterday about an hour was good enough. Actually, it was enough to get everyone really into what the issues were, and excellently well explained by Alison and Janet, and confirmed by Myles, as you'll hear a little bit later on. And we're also adding in, get a bit of a free bonus today, because we actually have learned from yesterday's session, adding one other topic to discuss and turn on as well. So that's good news. I just want to make quite clear, there are no JAG colleagues on the call this afternoon, so it's very much, you know, an internal house thing, albeit Myles is on the call. So our grand strategic audience, if you like, in the shape of DFT, is here, so note to that. Grateful, as usual, to our sponsors, Atkins Utility Solutions and Scooby. Thank you very much, without whom this wouldn't be possible. But with that, I see numbers are building up nearly on 20 people already, with a few more just joining as I'm speaking now. And but we're good to go. And Alison, let me turn it over to you first. And Alison, when you want to, go ahead and jump out with your slides.
Okay, thank you very much, Clive. Okay, so as people are joining, we'll just run through a few introductions, and I'll make a start on that. So I'm Alison Williams. For those of you that don't know me, I work for Openreach, and I've been here for about 24 years. The last 14 of them, I've been doing streetworks type roles, starting with local highways liaison type job, and then moving through a variety of streetworks responsibilities until landing in my current role as a policy and compliance manager. So my job at the moment is kind of keeping the business straight on its policies and procedures that are related to streetworks, but also looking at the barriers to us delivering for our customers and on our key infrastructure projects. I'm working with the government departments, Streetworks UK and Hawk, to think about what's working well in streetworks and what could be improved for the benefit of all. As part of this work, I've been lucky enough, or mad enough, to be involved in the working group who've undertaken the review of the Coordination Code of Practice for England. And I also represent on the Street Manager Governance Group. So I'm hugely interested in the future of streetworks and roadworks across England, Scotland and Wales. Now I'll just pass you over to Jan, and she'll tell you a bit about herself.
Just a bit, try to anyway. For those who don't know who I am, think yourself lucky, because you'd have sore ears, because I talk a lot. So I'm Jan Chapman. I work for Thames Water. I've been there for 25 years. And yesterday I said I was there in Streetworks for 14, and I actually worked it out 16. So it's not much. So 16 years I've been in streetworks related stuff. And I don't think I could ever do anything else. So you cut me in half and I'll be blue, and I'll be imprinted down the middle of TMA and NERSWA. I'm also on the Hawk coordination group, rewriting the book, the blue book as we like to see it. But I'm also got the dubious honour of being, well, I don't think it's dubious because I've loved every second, is being the subject matter expert for Street Manager on the project, and I've been there since Alpha started, so it's it's over 3 years now. And hopefully I won't talk too much about Street Manager today, but I will mention it in one of my little sections later on. So let's move forward.
Brilliant, well done. And Myles, a few words.
Thanks, Clive. I don't think I can live up to the billing of Jan and Alison there. I've been part of Streetworks since March this year, so I joined the Department for Transport supporting Sally Kendall in the Streetworks policy space. Unfortunately, I got diverted over to COVID, so I haven't been able to pick up as much this year as I was hoping to in my first year, but as ever, I'm excited to be a part of this and looking forward to contributing.
Well, extremely warm welcome indeed. Right, Alison, back to you.
Thank you. So just before I share a slide with you all, the objectives of this session are for us to have a quick review of some of the changes we've seen this year to date and look forward over the next year or so to see what's expected in the future. So maybe you can think about what that means for your business. Okay, so Jan and I are going to talk through the policy points first, and if you want to make a note of your questions, we can talk about them later when you're brought in as panelists, or you can put them in the chat, Tote, as Clive has already mentioned. But we'll answer questions at the end rather than as we're going through. Okay, I'll just share my slide with you. Okay. So I hope everybody can see the slide. Streetworks policy landscape.
Looks good.
Fabulous. Okay, so just to give you a quick highlight about what's going to happen on the slide, we've got a bit of a timeline here for the expected changes. The things that are highlighted in green are the things that Jan and I are particularly going to mention today. There are other things on the slides there that that we expect to be happening in those timeframes or thereabouts. Quite happy to talk about them if you want to when we get into the chat space afterwards. Okay, so without any further ado, I will make a start in 2020-21. So we've got a couple of things from this year that have already happened that we want to note. So obviously the reinstatement specification in England, the SROH for England, has been released and it's been published, but doesn't come into force until the 10th of May 2021. So you've got time to familiarise yourself with the specification and all of the things that you can do with that, including some of the new and innovative things that are in there. But don't forget, even though it's not in legal force yet, you can ask highway authorities to use the provisions of that code before the statutory implementation date. So if there's things in there that will help you to do more now, you know, have that conversation with the highway authority. We're entitled to do it, and it makes sense actually to bring some of that stuff forward, but it must be done by agreement. Okay, Jan, do you want to move on? So
the next thing we're going to talk about is the coordination code, which has now come out as a Hawk guidance document. So it's over 2 years in the making, and both me and Alison have been on that project alongside for the utility side. We had Paul Gerard, me, Alison, Sam Brothwell. And then we had 4 HA reps. We're not going to mention them today. As we said earlier, we haven't got any of them, so they don't need their time in the limelight. So we've so what we tried to do with that, the main remit was to try and take it purely back to the legislation, because we all know that there was some stuff in the Blue Book that wasn't actually backed by any legislation, and we've removed those and took it all the way back and related everything that's in there to the legislation that underpins it. We've also made it relevant for permit schemes, because it was only for notices, and because we've obviously got rid of the code of practice for permits, it's now actually all included in the coordination. So we wanted to remove all of the confusion around what was legally required and what wasn't, and we think we've done that. There's still some changes to be done, but some of them we'll be talking about a bit later on in one of the other sections. So the current state is, it's a Hawk document. It's presently held on the JAG website, until Hawk back up and running. So I think we've probably all got had sight of it by now. So I've just saved mine. I don't want to keep going to JAG. So it is currently that it will end up being statutory. So just use it in earnest, and we can and because there's lots of good stuff in there that actually will make a difference for what we're trying to do as an industry and moving forward. Next, Alison.
Okay, so coming up after that, the DFT have indicated, following the implementation of Street Manager and the new SROH, the DFT have made a clear indication that they want to pursue some further changes in streetworks, and there's a review of a number of areas of regulation at the moment. And they've discussed the second wave of change, and it's coming in 3 parts. And there's been a few workshops run over the last couple of months to help frame what's, what we need to do and what's likely to change coming up. So one of the first things that you may have heard about is it comes under the badge of kind of permit changes. So at the moment, there's been lots of discussions with the DFT, with the DCMS, and between Streetworks UK and JAG, so Hawk level discussions about what we need and don't need in permitting maybe, and we're looking at how we can get more flexible permitting, create new ways of working that looks at work in different ways, like batches or bundles of related work rather than one permit per street, to see if we can do it more efficiently, if the communications and coordination can be done in a way that works for everyone without it being a complete industry of just putting in lots of data all the time. So it's a concept that's got applications for all promoters, whether you are a utility or whether you're an authority, and we think that it could make coordination collaboration a lot easier. So the DFT have had some detailed workshops and are looking at some proposals which they intend to consult on. And that consultation is badged for kind of the end of this year. So we probably expect to see it after Christmas. Myles will probably confirm shortly. Initially, they thought they might get it in by the end of 2020, but it looks like it will be a little later. But lots of opportunity there, and keep your eyes open for it and think about how that can work for you. Hand in hand with that, and something that was thrown up by the review of the coordination code, is section 58 and what to do with section 58, because in the permit scheme regulations, section 58 is disapplied, and the view of the DFT was that there was no need for it because authorities could simply refuse works and things like that. However, in the real world, that causes lots of problems, because if there isn't processes for telling people about section 58 and understanding when restrictions are happening, all that great coordination that should happen before the restriction comes into force doesn't happen. And you may have noticed, if you read the regulations at Sport Street Manager, that there was no requirements in there with regards to the submission of section 58 notices. So following discussions with the DFT, it looks like that we are going to restore those links for section 58, bring it back into the world of permitting. And that means that it's highly likely that what we will end up with is a requirement for section 58 notifications to be served in Street Manager. And of course, that would be really welcome, giving us that one truth picture of what we need to know about the streets that we're going to be working in. So along with the proposed long flexi permits, we should expect to soon see a consultation on section 58 as well. The next thing that's up is something else that you may have been aware of. So there's been a TTRO discovery project that was undertaken, it was about 18 months ago, and the outcomes of that project were published in about September, and the outcomes that were recommended were that we should get greater transparency on costs of TTROs. Changes were required for the publication requirements for authorities. So one of the biggest costs and delays we have in arranging TTROs is that authorities are required to have it published in certain newspapers and things like that, and that puts a lot of delay and cost into the process. And it's recognised that actually that's a big barrier to all kinds of TROs that authorities have to do, including ones for their own purposes. So changes to the publication requirements are recommended, and standardised timescales to organise, so what we can do to compress those timescales, so organising a TTRO isn't as complex and doesn't take as long. That's been quite a long piece of work in the making. the implications of that piece of work are much wider than the TTROs and TTRNs that we require for streetworks, but we expect to see a consultation covering that in summer of 2021. Jan? Okay,
so just because I can't resist talking about Street Manager, Section 58 bit has already been sort of designed and user tested around how it's going to look, what Alison was describing earlier. So we probably see that in the UI, probably maybe around the time before the regulations come out, you never know. But there is definitely been user testing, so there probably will, that's going to come in the next phase. So we're going back to the second lot of changes or workshops that were held with Sally and the DFT was a badged street manager updates and the coords cop. So they were looking at particular items that were brought up that were either found while we were rewriting the coord review, and for things that would actually deliver what street manager wants or what is needed to get the real-time things. So the Section 58 came out with that. There was the traffic sensitivity, which I'll talk about shortly. So the first thing that we were looking at really was the non-NERSWA days, which is really one of the subjects that we've probably talked about a lot over the time, and we've panicked a lot, I think, both authority and utility. So it's not just us who were sitting there thinking we know we haven't got the resources to do that. So the first thing that the street manager's vision is for real-time data. And one of the first thing that we're looking at was the change of, maybe we need to change Section 98 in NERSWA, a definition of a working day, but the DFT chose not to redefine that because it was going to be too complex and would lead to further ramifications around other parts of legislation that might just make it too difficult to do. So, but that doesn't take away the need or the desire to have more real-time notifications. So there is that there probably we will be expected, and the regulations may well state it, that we be putting permit notifications out on non-NERSWA days, so over the weekend, overnight, in England, as it says on the slide. So it's likely to be required, so it's possibly quite an operational challenge for promoters, especially not every one of us has a 24-hour service where we've got people available in the office to press buttons. But there's going to be, obviously there'll be a consultation on it, and we're expecting that next summer. Alongside that, we were looking at the traffic sensitivity criteria. We all know and love them, especially the winter gritting one. So it's been pointed out that it's actually not really relevant. I mean, we've all had the same issue where some authority might decide to go and make its made their traffic sensitive list increase by many percentage to make it 24/7 notifiable for when it's a gritting route, when it's the middle of summer. Why have we got that? So I think it's been passed on to the coord review group, so me, Alison and Sam and Paul again, to look at that, to try and see whether we can review that, to see whether the criteria that are there are actually fit for this day and age. And then we can send feedback back to Sally and the DFT to try and see whether we can get them amended and made more realistic, or it looks as though it's the future rather than the past. And I think that's about it for there. Mm-hmm. But again, I forgot about this. Yeah, I've got to mention, haven't I? The consultation, that will all come out at the same as the other, so we're expecting that in summer next year.
Okay, thanks very much, Jan. And then for next year, we're also expecting to see the output from the review of the safety code. So the Red Book has been under review, and there was an ask earlier on this year for inputs and ideas and things that people felt needed to be in it. And that review is well underway, and Tom Lambert told us yesterday that we should expect to see that in 2021, which is good news. What the group are aiming to do in this particular review is to give flexibility on practical application of the guidance of the Red Book, because there's no way the Red Book can prescribe what is right for every scenario, and operatives need to understand how they can design an on-site solution that works, that is safe and that is right, but that isn't in detail prescribed by part of the Red Book, because that's not realistic, and that's what I think we all recognise about that world. I don't know if people are aware of the Hawk app, but there's a Hawk app that's being developed, which is kind of like a little thing that is to help people in understanding what to do in terms of signing, lighting and guarding, and it's got like a little VR element to it. And they're continuing to work on the links with the Hawk app, with the idea of bringing kind of the site-specific risk assessment, so what might I need in this scenario, and the guidance of the safety code, to bring it together for operatives, for people in the streets, so that they understand how to do the right thing, how to design a suitable solution for the location they're in. So there's a lot of work going on there, and I think it's something to really look forward to. The group have invested a lot of time in it, so we'll see how that works. And the final part that we're specifically going to talk to is the part 3 of the DFT's plan for reform, really, in Streetworks. So, and that is Streetworks Inspections. So what's under review in Streetworks Inspections? Well, we know that this is an area where the fact that we have a non-statutory code, and there's lots of different interpretations of the rights and wrongs, which people have tried to address and correct at various times, but it is a world of dispute, Streetworks Inspections. Most of us have been involved in quite difficult issues with authorities at one time or another. And the whole sphere of inspections is currently being reviewed, from the sample inspection regime, what should that look like, to what should an inspection unit be? So how are we going to define an inspection unit going forward? Is the current definition right, or should it be something different? And what's the best rationale to go with? What should the charges for a defect inspection be? Again, a subject of much dispute over the years between utilities and authorities. Not the individual charge that we currently ascribe, that £47.50, but when can that charge be applied, and lots of questions around that. There's a potential move in that area to a single inspection fee in relation to a defect. So a fee that won't be £47.50, it will be somewhere upwards of that, but it will cover the process for that particular defect. So there's a strong push, obviously, with the creation of Street Manager, for us to have a method where Street Manager can calculate the inspection units rather than rely on user inputs, as we've had to do in Eton. So in that design of the inspection unit, we want to be able to have Street Manager to interpret that, and Street Manager apply the inspection units. And that way we've got the least possible area for dispute in terms of agreeing how many inspection units we've incurred with any authority going forward. There's been some discussion around Section 81 and whether Section 81 inspections by authorities should come into this regime. And at the moment, there's been a firm indication that no primary legislation change is intended, and that means that Section 81 is not going to come into this sphere. Okay, so that's a clear indication. So this is a real work in progress at the moment. The review of the inspections code by the inspections working group has been going on for quite some time, and it has been a difficult piece of work for them. Hopefully that is now coming to a close, and we will move forward with this. Consultations expected in 2022-23 initially, but if possible, Myles indicated to us yesterday that DFT would love to bring that one forward if the group can complete their work sooner than that. So it might be a very busy year ahead in terms of consultations in England, but some long overdue reviews of areas of streetworks that I think we've all got a lot of interest in.
Great. Okay. Super. Alison, Janet, that's great. Great start. Good intro. What I want to do now was Myles on the call dialed in. Myles, just want to give you the opportunity if you want to comment on any of that. Does that exactly match your understanding with the sort of direction of travel, the timing that Alison talked about there, and anything you'd like to add on to anything that's said?
Yeah, great work from Alison and Janet there, so thank you. I think, just want to push that inspections one. I think I'm pushing for it to be consultant next year, so I think that timeline's hopefully going to squeeze a lot. I think there'll be transition periods, I think, in terms of implementing anything, it would be looking at 22, 23. But in terms of getting detail out to public consultation, that'll definitely be next year's job. Overall, everything else there is spot on. I think the one thing I'm always going to caveat is obviously we're beholden to ministers and the politics and what happens with Brexit, and hopefully COVID will be wrapped up sometime next year. But yeah, always going to be a big caveat there with, we need to agree details with ministers. So other than that, we're very much ploughing on and hoping to deliver some good work in the coming years.
Excellent.
And if I can just speak up there, Clive, as well, really important to note actually that if you're looking at this slide at the moment, this last year where we've had everything impacted by COVID, lots of the things that are referred to on this slide have slid because of that COVID impact. So it is really important to understand that while we expect these timescales, these are, as has been said, quite aspirational. I hope we get there, because change can't come quick enough for me in some of these areas. But yeah, there's definitely room for some of these things to move in and out a little bit. Okay,
excellent. Good. All right, Alison, if you could, that's great. If you could do that with the screen now, that's super. Let's just move slightly to one side now, and just take all that we've just discussed there as being our current understanding of things. But let me turn to Alison and Janet to begin with. Perhaps Alison first. If we had a clean sheet of paper and there were any sort of policy things out there that we wanted resolved, which is currently not on the sheet at the moment, what sort of things would you like to have popped on the list there, Alison? Maybe you could start us off.
Well, I think for England, certainly, we are going through the most comprehensive review of streetworks that we'll see in my work in life. Do you know what I mean? We are looking at most of the key areas in England at the moment, and I am really, really pleased to hear that. And of course, the Transport Scotland Act is bringing with it quite a lot of change, and that's going to happen over the next couple of years as well. So there's so much going on, and the changes are enormously widespread. What I don't like to see, and what I would like to see addressed actually, is the widening gap between what's happening in England and Wales, really, because Wales is not particularly active, and in a way that's great, because it means you don't need to think about stuff and change stuff. But actually, the operational challenges that arise when we get these wider differences between the devolved administrations is quite difficult for an operator that's working in all the regions. So I would like to ensure that the things that are good about streetworks and roadworks propagate everywhere, and that we get a better level of consistency. Even with localism and devolution, we need to have a level of consistency for the industry.
Okay. So greater consistency. There's not much Myles can do about that particular issue, because it's more a pan UK thing. Janet, let me turn it over to you. Janet, what's bubbling under for you?
I'm not going to say what I said yesterday.
No, go on. It's well,
I think we should repeal TMA and Nursworth start again from scratch, because I think then we'll have a set of consistent, unmisinterpreted legislation that we can all work to. I think we are working with rules that were set back in 27 years ago up, and then even then 16 years ago. It's old hat, and I think, to me, we could easily come up with something new and innovative and the way to work better. So yes, let's repeal a lot and start again. But I did say it tongue-in-cheek yesterday, and I've said it again a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think there's many a truth in jest. I think there's probably ways and means to try and bring the legislation that we all work to up to today's standards, so that is fit for the future, so we don't have to keep going back and reviewing and changing and putting in extra bits just to, like sticking plasters. We need to stop using sticking plasters and have something strong basis instead. So that's my thought on that.
All right, Janet, thank you. Adam, you turn your camera on. Did you have a point you want to make?
Yeah, just to go to agree with Janet, really. I think one thing that we all do, and we're all probably all guilty of, is we get bogged down in legislation and that many different types of legislation. I think simplifying some things would make it much easier, especially when you're talking about some of the discussions that we had earlier on in the day with bringing new people in and training them up. I think one problem is, at the end of the day, we're digging holes, we're installing asset, we're backfilling and reinstatement. It's not rocket science, you know what I mean? And we complicate it with legislation and everything else. I think there's definitely a time to simplify things a little bit and try and get it into some form of one document that you know, general people can understand. That was all I wanted to say on that.
Oh, Adam, thank you. Reinforcing Janet's point. Myles, simplicity of legislation. This is beyond 2025, that's for sure. But also, you know, I think there will be others on the call who would say, well, you know what, we know what we know. But any quick reflection on that, Myles?
Yeah, I said this yesterday. I think it's important to put forward proposals. I think I'm open, Sally's open to feedback, and I know we joked yesterday saying open up the floodgates, but genuinely do welcome approach from the industry. If there's new ways of working and new thinking, then get in contact. I think obviously short term, it's not possible. It's like trying to shoot a rocket up to Mars and live in there, but definitely in the medium term, yes, there is on the horizon we can look at making big changes to primary legislation, but it's got to be backed by evidence, got to be backed by proposals that have could have been trialed. And I think it's important as well to always recognise there's a balance that I do appreciate. Obviously, there's important services being provided to the public, but equally the roads do need to be maintained at the public purse as well. So there's always that balancing act of what we're trying to achieve.
Okay. Roy, you had your camera switched on there for a second. Did you want to come in, Roy?
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi Jan.
Hi Roy.
All right. Yeah, just a question for Jan really. She mentioned the non-NERS were days, which is a bit frightening to be honest. So, and also there was no changes to the working day. So were the DFT looking at permit applications from 8 till 4:30 on a Saturday and Sunday, or could they be looking at out of hours permit notifications as well as weekend?
I'll go in first. I think the notifications that they're after is more starts and stops, because this is you've got to remember the data from Street Manager is going to feed in, is it open data that's feeding into sat navs or any other I suppose, even if we think of Elgin, so it's going to feed into there, so the information is given to the users, rather than us saying we're going to start on Saturday and then we'll send the start on Monday, so no one knows what was going on over the weekend.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a case of having to send the application, Roy. I think it's being able to send the real-time updates as when you are working over a weekend. So it's more the starts and stops.
Okay, could that?
I think they'll have to. So I don't think you need to worry that much, because then they would be changing the NERSWA definition.
Right.
Alison can tell me I'm wrong if she likes.
You're probably right as usual.
No, that is correct.
Myles is yeah. Go ahead, Myles.
Yeah, we're more looking at we're looking at the start-stop notices, not going further than that at present.
Okay. Good.
Does that help you, Roy?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thanks for the question, Roy. Any other questions on the floor? Then please do pipe up. I've got a couple more really, and I guess one of the things I'm quite interested to get the panel's view on, and in particular Alison and Janet. It's not directly a policy, but it's an outcome, should we say, of street manager visibility, and speaks to the point that Baroness Veer made this morning about unused permits. I know Alison will have a view on this strongly, but. Janet, do you want to kick off, please, and give a riposte to Baroness Veer's jibe that 20% of our permits are unused, and that's an administrative burden for everybody in the system?
But I think it's an it is an administrative burden, but there are valid reasons for that. I think what she was probably referring to is the cancellations as such. So, I mean, a lot of cancellations do go through Street Manager, but a lot of cancellations have got really valid reasons in there. So you've got refused permits, people will cancel them. You've got where the customer won't give you access, you've got to cancel them. Where the council say get off site, so you have to leave, you've got to cancel it or don't come in. But one of the biggest problems that we face usually is cars parked, because you'll suspend your parking bay and you get there and no one will actually enforce that parking bay suspension that we've paid for, and then we've got to go and apply for it again. We've got to cancel it. Now, I can't say that's everything. It certainly isn't, but it's certainly not as bad a picture or jibe then, because there is reasons for them. Yes, we can probably improve our planning, but then a lot of it is down to the contracts that we've all got in place. So I think there's ways and means, and I think there needs a bit of qualification to the numbers that are being shouted about, in my personal opinion anyway.
Got it. Okay, Janet, thank you. Alison, did you want to add anything on to that?
Yeah, I mean, we know that cancellations are a burden to both sides, to ourselves and to authorities. Nobody wants to cancel a permit that they're paying for either. You know, that is a cost to any business. But when you are working in an industry where you are using high volume of short duration works, it becomes an inevitability, because you need to have fluid work to go at. You know, you may need to overplan your permit, so you'll plan to your capacity and maybe a little bit extra, because actually if you get to one of those jobs that Jan's talked about, where there's a car parked and you can't get in, then you need alternative work to flip people onto, otherwise you've got idle gangs. So you need to have flexibility and fluidity in your work. And cancellations are a symptom really of our work not being predictable, and that's because of parked cars, it's because of sickness, it's because of other things going on in the street, it's because of hitting a snag on a job and overrunning on one job and not being able to start another. And especially because what permits do is they reduce our opportunities to start work on day 2 or later on. The validity periods aren't there, the slide isn't there. So having permit schemes has reduced off the flexibility of our work. It makes it harder, and it makes cancellations much more likely. That's one of the primary benefits that we hope to be able to achieve from a flexible permitting regime, where types of work that can be grouped together can be done flexibly, and that gives you more options if something's wrong on one street, that you've got something else that you can do, you know. And I think reducing cancellations will be a significant benefit of flexible permitting, and it's something we're really looking forward to finding out.
Okay, good. All right, well, that's really helpful. Myles, I'm sure you're just taking all that on board and nodding wisely, quietly there, and raising an eyebrow or two, doubtless, as well. Look, Alison and Janet, just stay with us a second, because one of the things I do want to delve into is this aspect, the other aspect that Baroness Veer drew attention to was the huge success of Street Manager as a program, as she described it. And you know, in no small part, that's down to the embedding of yourself and the fantastic work you've done in supporting that program, along with Paul G from Streetwear UK. But my more generalized question for the panels and for the panelists, all panelists now and attendees, is what did you sort of take away from that in terms of the government running a program like Street Manager? Obviously the embedding worked well, but what did you take away from the experience? I mean, still, I come back to Street Manager governance in a second. I've got a follow-up question about that. But in terms of, you know, the evolution of the program over the 18, 20, 24 months or so with KNOS, what's your takeaway from it?
Are you asking a question to me or others?
To you, Janet.
Right, yeah. Well, I think my life has just turned into Street Manager. But I think the takeaway is, I think that working together, collaboration is one of the words that's been bandied around a lot recently, and is going to keep coming up. And it's not just collaboration with Streetworks, it's collaboration in anything that we do with government, with authorities, with other utilities, or even just between ourselves. I think the collaboration has been brilliant. I've enjoyed every second. I can't say anything other. I have enjoyed every bit, and I've certainly made myself heard, because I'm not one for sitting down. I'm not a wallflower or anything. I talk a lot, as everyone knows anyway. But I think the collaboration aspect of that, and actually it was a successful because we worked together, highway authorities and utilities and the DFD. I mean, a lot of the time I think it was, it's a really rare opportunity to get involved in something that was going to affect the whole of England. Whereas normally what we've had before is he's eaten 6, get on with it. He's the code of practice, get on with it. It was actually building it from scratch was just an amazing experience for me. And I think collaboration was key there for everyone.
Okay, Alison, anything to add to that?
I think we were very early supporters of this idea of a single view of the street, as it were, and I welcome Street Manager, and it's not been entirely without issues, and we've had lots of challenges along the way, but I think it's been a largely successful transition, and that actually the way of working that has been developed in terms of how we gather around Street Manager is it will be the vehicle that will help us do this Streetworks transformation that we need to do over the next couple of years. You know, it will enable it in a way that it would have taken us many years in the previous, you know, design with Eton and lots of different off the shelf solutions and all of that kind of wealth. This is the vehicle that helps us move forward. So I welcome Street Manager, not entirely without its problems, but it has been a great piece of work, and I think it has brought us together, like Jan says, in a more collaborative way than before.
Well, thanks for that, Alison. Thanks for being so clear about that. This is a policy session. I don't want to overly major on Street Manager because this is an implementation piece of policy to a certain degree. But however, Street Manager has been a fairly foundational plank in terms of how we take some of those policy things forward. In terms of Street Manager governance going forward, Janet, how do you feel that's working? Can you give the people on the panel a sense of how that's going from your point of view? Because you're one of our SMEs on the Street Manager governance panel.
Well, I view myself on the governance panel as helping the members of the governance team. So Sam and Alison and Alistair and I'm going to get told off because I've forgotten James. Yes, who actually are the governance members. I am just there to support them and help them understand what is coming and what it would actually mean, just to help them along. So I think that's working quite well because we all have a catch up before the governance meeting. So any questions that the people who are sitting on the board as such have got, then we'll do them before we go in. So I think it's working well in that respect, but you're probably better off asking Alison because she might think I'm useless.
Go on, Alison.
So I think it's starting to work really well. Now the initial meetings were a lot more challenging because they were a bit freeform. We didn't really have an agenda. We were kind of trying to corral things and make sure that what we got was a structure that we understood, that we knew what we were coming to the meeting to do, that we weren't getting involved in the wrong type of minutiae, because we can't, as a governance group, we are setting direction for Street Manager on what's going to be our priorities, but we can't know the ins and outs of all the hundreds of little ideas people have put in there. So we've evolved over the course of this year. We've established now quite a good running order, and it feels like we make progress at all the meetings now, and that's really good. And our side support from our SMEs is, we need that. They are the ones that fill in those gaps and tell us where the value is and where the worth is and whether we're all going in the right direction. And we get to sign off on those things and have, really actually using constructive discussions. You would be amazed how constructive the discussions are in the Street Manager governance group. They are really mature. There's few things that come to some of the debates you might see in some hawk arenas. We don't get so much of that in Street Manager governance. We are very much trying to get to the right goals together.
Well, I take that as being very reassuring, because of course part of the important things saying forward in policy terms actually is the order in which we tease out and tick off those things in terms of improvement goals for Street Manager. And it's right that we have a top-down and agreed and proper approach. Talking about top-down, if you look in the chat, Peter Loft asked a question at 2:41, the summation of which is, hey, there's a heck of a lot of competing priorities here. you know, between green, between active travel, electric vehicle charging points, regulators' inputs, the demands to keep improving continuity, and all these competing issues that that utilities have to deal with at any one stage. Myles, clearly I'm going to come to you at this stage on this one in due course. But firstly, from Alison or Janet, you know, the sort of Peter's asking there, is there a helicopter view of these differing priorities being undertaken by someone in the government somewhere? Or actually, just addressing, I'll let Myles come on to this one, but Alison and Janet, is it something that, in your experience in the industry, it's even realistic to imagine that government or a single government department would have that anyway? And is it something actually you prefer to influence and take control on in your respectively, what are respectively pretty damn large companies?
I'll speak
ahead,
very
Alison.
briefly, Jan, if you don't mind. So my view of this is that, one, there are lots of initiatives that go on in many spheres, as Peter has pointed out in his question, which are not necessarily streetworks, and where local authorities do not necessarily consult with streetworks parties, statutory undertakers like ourselves, because various other legislation is used to make other changes. There's lots of things that the UK needs to do, that we need to do for the right reasons, but we all need to be on that journey together. And I do think there needs to be some way of pulling this together so that everybody's needs are balanced. And that is quite important, because we can find ourselves, you know, you can find one policy disincentivizing streetworks undertakers to do the right thing, and we've seen a couple of recent examples of that. And Myles, we probably need to have a much more detailed discussion about some of that stuff going forward.
Before I bring Myles in, Janet, did you want to add anything further from what Alison just said there? Or you?
I don't think there's much more to add, but I think that it is very difficult when you've got competing priorities coming in. But I think the government also has, when they've got competing sections, and whether they actually, I mean, I'm sure they talk to each other. I am, honestly. But I'm not sure that they engage or even understand what the ramifications are on another industry. I think sometimes it's needed to bring together, as Alison said. I think a helicopter view is where I tend to look at, but that's probably I've caught that from Mr. Loft, because I work with him. So I look at the helicopter view. I just think we need to look at everything all at once, and then you can actually see how it comes down in the funnel. And I think we just don't get it in a funnel. We just get it as raindrops. And
okay. No, point well emphasized, point well made. And so, Myles, you now have your Augusta Westland or your Sikorsky helicopter. How would you respond, Myles? I know you're not the most senior person in DFT, but give us a view as you see it from your level.
Yeah, I'd totally understand that from the outside perspective. It might seem like there's a lot of competing priorities. Of course there is, and I think the realistic landscape is governments come and go and they have their own priorities, and unfortunately that trumps whatever priorities we as policymakers may be trying to develop, be that across departments or as a department singular. But I think, you know, the best thing to do is to be in contact with us, to approach us. We'll always, you know, we work with DCMS, we work with and also work with the Housing and Communities departments, and we work as closely with them, and we also work with Treasury. So there is that network there. But I think the problem we've got is, you know, Number 10 will come in on a manifesto. Yeah. They'll have certain things that they want to deliver. If what we're doing doesn't fit, then it just simply doesn't. It's not something that the government will push. And I think there's a lot of policy work that gets dropped, a lot of work that we do that unfortunately just gets scrapped purely because someone in Number 10 decides no. And I think that's always going to be the ultimate issue that we're always going to be up against, is certain things will get priority because it suits the government at that point. Other things that might have massive benefit will get put to the side, and that's just purely because it's not a priority of the government. So we are beholden, unfortunately, to Number 10 and ultimately what they want to get through.
Okay, well, thanks, Myles. That's absolutely the realism of the situation that you as a civil servant face in government, and which you faithfully, I know, reflect to ministers, all the way up to ministers, you know, our feelings, wishes on that. And the best we can hope is that you faithfully report our position, and most important of which is that we have, you know, that good shared understanding, and we're making our case to you in a proper, eloquent, and in an engaging way. Peter, I hope that's sort of given you a bit of a flavour in terms of answer your question. I'm sure it didn't really add massively to your knowledge of the situation, but it's a question well posed, and a question. Do come back verbally if you want to, Peter, at this stage. Otherwise, I think we're pretty much there, actually, in terms of this particular policy session. I don't see any more questions in the tote. If anybody wants to jump on the wire and ask anything verbally, then do please go ahead now. What I'd like to do, just in reverse order, is Myles, is there anything else you'd like to add? I mean, you put that very eloquently just now, into sort of the cross Whitehall working and stuff like that, and reassuring us in terms of that. Anything else you'd like to add in before closing?
Yeah, just on the Baronosphere, I haven't watched the video. I will get around to it probably tomorrow. But I think the main crux is, I think, hopefully, I mean, I will watch it and get the takeaway. But my understanding is obviously that she's just trying to pick up on the fact that street managers now giving us data. Let's use that data to try and improve certain situations. Let's spotlight it and have a look and look deeper at the data. And I think obviously we want to at some point add a drop down box on the cancellation reason in Street Manager, which will obviously give us more data and help with analysis and support improvements. But yeah, important to get feedback, but also recognize that it's also, you know, Street Manager is going to bring us data that will hopefully benefit everyone and help us improve things.
No, absolutely, Myles. That's exactly as we would see it as well. In reverse order to starting, Janet, any final thoughts on this policy session in terms of what you've heard from the floor or what you've heard articulated by anybody else?
Well, no, I think I'd just like to mention the data in Street Manager that Myles was talking about. I think that, yes, having the single database is one version of whatever's gone on. However, I think there's a danger of missing the context. So I think sometimes, yeah, we can get as much data out as we like, but we need to understand the context. And that's just really, I think that's where, when we talked about the cancellations, I think that we need to put the context behind that, because it's not just black and white, as the data would give out, really. I would say, really, just let's look at the context before jumping on the bandwagon and thinking, oh, we'll change this. But if we don't understand the reason for it, what's the point of change?
Okay. All right, Janet. Thank you. And lastly, Alison, let me come to you for any final closing remarks on everything you've heard this afternoon.
So I would just like to reiterate that we have gone through a huge wave of change so far, and there is so much more to come. You know, it's really important to be aware of what's coming up. And as a member of the coordination group and currently on the Street Manager governance group, you know, we are here to understand the concerns of our colleagues in the industry, you know, as to what's going right and what's going wrong. So, you know, make sure that you feed into our conversations in Streetworks UK via your forums, whatever. You know, we need to know what's concerning you and whether we all have the same common issues, and figure out together how we can take those forward and get a better Streetworks landscape for us.
Yeah, well, that's what it's all about, isn't it, Alison? Getting the best possible landscape we can. I just want to reflect upon as we close out. It's been a useful and interesting session. This one thing that wasn't touched on today, that was touched on yesterday, I'm reminding myself, was this issue to do with carrot and stick. We actually majored on it for, you know, quite a 10 or 11 minute bit of the session yesterday, in terms of that balance between carrot and stick, between ourselves and the local authorities, and you know, how much that DfT would provide, you know, the proper framework for that to work. You know, my own sense is quite a lot of what was gained through COVID was, you know, the Playfair notification, the great work done by Peter and the rest of the team in terms of sketching that stuff out, promulgating it, and quite a lot of that sort of, you know, working properly, encouraging each other and collaborating well in terms of what we do. Is better than just working under an FPN regime that only sinks to drive one's head into the ground. And that's the only other thing I think, you know, as an overarching thing, I think it's important for us to reflect upon and keep articulating the need for, you know, good collaboration, good positive coordination, enthusiasm to get the right job done right time, and to incentivize rather than to penalize all the time, and that way you get the best possible outcomes to the policy imperatives you laid on the table. Good. All right. Well, I think we're going to give you about 5 minutes back of your time today. Let me, on behalf of all of you on the panel, come live on the microphone if you want to. But a big thank you to Alison, Janet, and indeed to Myles. And I'll give you a little bit of a clap here for doing that. Thank you very much indeed for opening our eyes up to a few of the issues there that you've been dealing with and daily dealing with over the course of the last year or so. All right, we'll close the session down there now. Thanks very much indeed. For those who can join, see you at 3 o'clock, excavated waste with the Jameses. All right, cheerio. Thanks again. Bye-bye. Thanks all for joining. Bye-bye.